You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the show where we talk to women who are at a high level in the entertainment industry and hear their stories. This week I got to sit down with Amy Lemisch. She's the executive director of the California Film Commission. She spent 18 years being Penny Marshall's right-hand woman, and then once she had kids, she transitioned into being the film commissioner. She has a great story. Have a listen.
So I moved to California right after college. I thought I wanted to make documentary films, and I thought, I'll get a couple features under my belt, and then I'll move back to New York or something. So I'm from Philadelphia. And then, life happens, as they say. So I wanted to just get any kind of entry-level job. I ended up, in addition to waitressing, I got a job working for Penny Marshall right away.
That's a pretty good first job.
Yeah. Well, she was in between jobs. So she had finished, it was about a year after Laverne and Shirley. The show ended, and she was kind of figuring out what she was going to do with her life. And I got hired to be her personal assistant, go for her house girl, go grocery shopping, gift shopping, do whatever, anything. And it was a eye-opening introduction to Hollywood because she was a pretty big celebrity at the time, knew every celebrity, was very well connected, lived in a big rambling Hollywood Hills home. I had never, where I grew up, I didn't know any rich people, let alone celebrity people. So it was very interesting. But it truly did. It was whatever, I would do anything. It didn't matter.
Was she married to Rob Reiner at the time?
No.
Or this is later?
She was already divorced.
Okay.
And her daughter was already out of the house, so it was really just her in this big house and a cleaning person and me. And wow. She was looking to direct, and she had directed episodes when she was doing Laverne and Shirley, and people were sending her scripts, and she was looking for projects and that sort of thing. And then I was also doing on the side, AFI has that directing workshop for women?
Yeah. Okay.
So they had it for a very long time, and they were pretty high-quality projects. So I would volunteer and work on productions to learn a craft, right? So I was volunteering as a camera assistant. I actually thought, I like this. Maybe I'll be a cinematographer. And so on weekends, I would do shoots or whatever, and then work during the week at my day job. And then almost a year went by, and I started to get the feeling she wasn't going to direct, and it was just talk. And anyway, I left, and I took a job working for a commercial producer because I was anxious to kind of get started and working in production. The commercial producer was cuckoo, and it was like these schlocky, like 1-800-555, those kind of commercials, yeah. Right?
Not high art,
no,
like most commercials.
No. And her company went belly up, so 3 months later I was out of a job, and I was back to, just about to take another waitressing job, and I got a phone call from Penny Marshall, who said, I got a movie to direct, do you want to come work for me?
Oh, great.
So it was like, it worked out really well. Because I had left, she had to hire the house girl, the gopher, so she hired me to work with her on the movie as assistant to the director.
Fantastic.
So it was great. So obviously we left on good terms, and we got along well, and she thought I was capable, so I went back. That movie was Jumping Jack Flash. And she replaced a director. So it was truly trial by fire, and she had to jump in.
Was it already in production?
Oh, yeah. They had shot for 2 weeks in New York with a different director.
Oh, no.
They pulled the plug, fired the director, brought the whole production to L.A., so there was almost no prep. Oh, and it was, here's all your department heads, by the way. It was sort of like she just had to step into an already existing, it was already cast. They had hired the DP, the costume designer,
So it's director for hire.
Yes.
It's not, this is your
and trial
artistic
by fire.
vision.
That's right. So it was, but in a way, maybe that was good for her first movie because some of it was already set up, but it was also very difficult because to make script changes that far in, every weekend it was cut and paste. And I'm going to maybe age myself now, but do you remember the term cut and paste?
It was manual strip boards?
Yes. Well, you would take the script and cut it up and piece it and tape it together in the order, because nobody had, final draft back then. So it was really 7 days a week. Both of us, script meetings on the weekends, and then shooting on, the weekdays, and very, very long days. A, she used to shoot very long, and B, she would get together with her DP every night and plan out. He was a lovely man, and plan out the shots for the next day, because she's new and you have to do it. But it was, a really great. You can't ask for a better entry-level job working for a director, right? I tell everybody this who's, when I often will meet with young people moving out, trying to break in, it is absolutely the best entry-level job, because you get to see everything from script development to casting, all the way through post-production and the final delivery requirements, Yeah.
Like a PA is nowhere near as close to the action as you are.
Right.
Did you go to school for film?
I did, but it wasn't that sort of like what I see now with people coming out of school, that very hands-on, they know how to do a board and a budget, and they know how to use Avids when they come out of school. It wasn't that. It was more that theoretical
appreciation.
Yes, right. So, basically nothing I learned in school helped me technically in my job.
So that was your graduate school.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
So what happened after that?
So then obviously we got along well, and I was loyal to her and she was loyal to me, and I continued to work with her on every movie she ever did, every project she did. And I just sort of kept taking on more and truly learning on the job. So one of the other good things was, because she didn't have a fully fleshed out company, I would be the first one on. I was the first hire. So I was involved in hiring all the department heads and researching cinematographers and costume designers and production designers and helping with that whole process. And because of that, eventually, and I was also the only one on all the way through post-production. So the next movie we did together was Big. And I ended up doing all the post-production supervision on that one, because I was the only one around. It just sort of happened because I was around, right?
So that makes you a producer.
Yeah. So I just kept taking. So I learned post-production by doing it, and then next project was Awakenings, and I was the associate producer on that, and eventually through all the prep and working on all these projects, I eventually got into the Directors Guild as a UPM. So. Because I was, again, in the early stages, I was doing the board, and I had to learn how to do budgets and hiring the department heads and figuring out where you're going to locate the movie. And this was before incentives.
Yeah.
So we would look at what locations worked, and we would do budgets and look at what made sense. You still did those cost comparisons, but incentives weren't factored in. It was the prevailing rates, or how expensive it was to work in a particular place. So I ended up getting in so I became her line producer and co-producer and all of that. And then in between movies, we would look for scripts. And then the company got bigger, and we had more partners at the company and development executives and all of that, looking for projects.
What was the company called?
Parkway Productions. And we were based at a lot of different places, but mostly we were at Sony for many, many years, under various term deals. We had a term deal at Universal for a number of years, back to Sony.
So how many years were you with her?
It was about 18 years.
So did you ever go produce for other people or go out on your own?
No, the only time I produced for other people was we, through Parkway Productions, produced a film called, we did two films, two small, sort of like $3 million budget movies. So I would work as producer on those films. I was associate producer on one of them, and then that was called Calendar Girl. And then another one was called With Friends Like These, and I was a co-producer on that one. And then So in between we would do some of that. There was a TV series in the middle there somewhere. And she wouldn't do, a movie a year. There would be downtime. There would be at least a year between movies, and each project would take at least 2 years.
Wow.
From prep to the end of post, it would be a 2-year process. Her post-production was very lengthy, 6 to 8 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's almost a whole career with her.
It is. That was my career. I mean, I learned everything working for her and having all those opportunities.
That's
incredible.
incredible.
It was really amazing. Yeah. Met some great people.
Yeah, I imagine just the people coming in and out of that
I
office.
met my husband. She had a track record, actually. On Awakenings, my husband was the first AD, and I was the associate producer. And we met on that movie, and I'm married to him, and I have 2 kids. And then
How long have you been married?
We have been married for almost 20 years. No, is it that long? No, 18 years. And there was another. There were quite a few marriages from that one movie. Another woman who I worked very closely with, who was Penny's assistant on that movie, she met her husband on it as well. It was really interesting.
That's really great.
Yeah.
That's good. So then you both got married, and were you both still doing movies for many years? I thought.
Yeah, so I was still working for Penny, so I was based out here, and my husband Tony was, we shot that in New York, and he was a New Yorker. And so it was a long distance thing for a while. He kept coming back and forth, and the visits just kept longer visits and longer visits. And he was a first AD, so he was freelance. So it was easier for him to pick up and move.
So at some point, you guys had kids in the middle of this career. And then how did you navigate that and negotiate that?
Right. So that's a perfect segue, actually, because that's part of how I went from production to the film commission. So I had my first child, and I was still working and doing production. And it was hard. I did just the minimal 3 months off, went back to work. We weren't in production at that time, so it was not as difficult. But, those kind of hours
Hard.
as a working mom is very difficult, right? So, oh no, you know what? I think we were, I know what it was. I was pregnant, so I prepped, and then the movie went to New York to shoot, and I gave birth a few days before shooting. So I hired a production manager. We hired a production manager, line producer, to take it from there. And then when they wrapped, they were going to come back to LA, and I was going to take over for post. But I was getting calls. I mean, I was like in between contractions. I was like, I can't talk right now.
I just need today off.
When you pass the baton, it's tricky because there's some little piece of information they need, but I wasn't there, so I wasn't there for the shoot. But it did feel like that. It was hard to kind of disconnect and all of that. But I did. So I basically had my maternity leave while they were shooting. So I would be in touch by phone, but they had it covered. I went to visit once. I took the baby with me, and we went back to visit once while they were shooting. And then I took over post, and I do remember we would be, as I said, we had these very long post-production periods, and we would be on the mixing stage on weekends and late, and my husband would bring the baby by to visit mommy, on the dark mixing stage and that sort of thing. And then I guess we didn't do another movie for a while, and we were just in that, searching for the next once that project finished and searching for the next project. A couple of years go by. And then when I was pregnant with my second child, they're about 3 years apart, we lost our term deal, so the company folded. So somewhere in the middle there, with a very close friend of mine, I produced a documentary. She directed, I produced, called In the Bag. And it was about what women keep in their handbags.
Oh,
and
I love it.
And we had, I'll send you a copy because I have to dig it out of the garage, but we had a complete cross section of people. It was really interesting. It was kind of quirky and fun. Like Phyllis Diller came in that was our...
It showed you what was in her handbag?
And we had, we had a home, basically from a homeless woman to Phyllis Diller. It ran the gamut, and it was really sweet. So
I love it. I used to joke that I was ready to play Let's Make a Deal at any moment,
right,
because I'd have a spoon and a pacifier and my wallet and everything in there.
Exactly.
Oh, that's
right.
so fun.
So that was kind of cool. Our last couple movies were not that successful, and it was at that time when there was contraction going on and these sort of generous term deals at the studios where they were cutting them back. So we were without a deal and without a company. And I was 7 months pregnant. I was enormous. So I just went home. I never really I never had not worked. I worked, since middle school, basically, babysitting, and I always worked through high school, and I worked all through college. So I really never had time off. So I said, I'm going to take a year off and go home and birth my baby, and So I did, and that was very nice. It was interesting. It was a hard adjustment because I was used to such a rigid schedule and so structured.
How weird to be home.
Yeah, my husband, like in the beginning, I would say, how do you know what day it is? Like,
or what time it is.
Right, So, so I did that, and then it was just about a year, and I sort of looked at the calendar and said, okay, time to get back to work. What am I going to do? And I'll go through my phone contacts, and I'll start making calls.
Your Rolodex?
Yes, my Rolodex. And but what I realized is that because most people in this business, they jump around and they're freelance or they move from company to company, but I didn't. I stayed with one person my whole career up to that point. So I went through my contacts and I basically called everyone in a day. It wasn't that many contacts, I realized. I thought I was so well connected, but
it's really unusual.
When you only work for one person, your net only goes so far.
Yeah.
So I kind of went, oh, okay, now what? and so I was kind of talking to a lot of people and making calls, and I didn't really feel like I could do production at that time, with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. Do I really want to work 14 hours a day, and can you travel? Not really. And I was also in a situation where I had the experience, but there were, if it was sort of line producer jobs I was going up for, there's 100 other line producers where that's all they did, and who had 100 projects under their belt, as opposed to me having some projects under my belt. So it was,
you had some hits too.
Yeah,
like you did
right.
Movies.
But if you're like that nuts and bolts person, it really didn't feel like the right fit, and that wasn't going to work for me for a variety of reasons. So I was kind of trying to cast a wider net and see what other opportunities there might be. Anyway, so I had a couple, then I finally, a couple things came through. I was about to sign on to take a temporary job overseeing post-production for a company. And then at the same time, I met with a board member on the California Film Commission, who was an old friend of mine. He happened to be on the board, and he set me up and said, go meet with the chair of the board. So I met with the chair of the California Film Commission board. She was an executive at Paramount, a terrific person, just told me, what the job was. I told her all about my background, and they really wanted someone. It was vacant for about 6 months, and they really wanted someone with a production background. They had never had that before. So they did a lot of background checking and, searched about, followed up on me. And then they said, we want to take you up to meet the governor, so you have to decide if you want. Because basically they decided they wanted me, and I was sort of their only candidate at that time. So if, the governor said yes, it would be done. So I took the weekend to think about it, and I jumped in.
Because why not?
Yeah, right.
Who was the governor at the time?
Arnold.
Oh. So how was that meeting?
Well, so that was really interesting. So the big shocker was that I really did not know what I was getting into working for the state. a state government job. I mean, you cannot have more of a contrast going from not only working in movies in Hollywood, working for a celebrity, kind of dysfunctional kind of personality, like a
typical
wild personality, working with such a wide range of different kinds of people and that kind of pressure, to going to work in a very buttoned up state government environment and all the protocols and rigidity and all of that. It was wild. Really wild. I did not realize that side of it. But the meeting, getting appointed was, I guess I was lucky. He sort of trusted the recommendation of the board, so there wasn't a lot. I mean, I don't know what vetting was going on behind my back.
Did he call Penny?
No, but I mean, people did. I mean, people were calling all over the place, finding out about me. But so whatever, that worked out. And then meeting the governor was really just a formality. It was all of, a 4-minute meeting, and that was that. And then meeting all the other people up there. There's an appointment secretary, and there's a... the film commission was under an agency at that time, meeting the agency secretary, and
did you have to buy a suit for this interview?
Yeah, exactly. I didn't have the clothes either. I did not. Everybody wears a suit in Sacramento, and we wear jeans to work every day.
Kitten heel shoes.
Yes. Exactly. Right. And they don't just wear a suit, it's everybody wears gray. It was really interesting. I mean, I remember going to meetings when I was under my agency at the time, was the Business Transportation and Housing Agency, and I would have to go up for the director meetings. So the hierarchy is, there's the governor's office, and then there's agencies, and under each agency are different departments, and the film commission is a department. And I'd be sitting around the table with all the other directors, and everyone around the table was a man in a gray suit. It was very interesting. But that was okay. It was more...
So were you the one woman up there?
Oh, not always. I mean, that time, who was our agency? We had our agency secretary was a woman. And the interesting thing, too, was that Arnold had a lot of Democrats in his administration, which is, I guess, how I was appointed, because they didn't look at that. And it wasn't... Sometimes appointments are, someone who worked on a campaign. This was different. This was just, I was recommended to actually be able to do the job, and they,
you had to be qualified for this.
I guess it didn't matter that I was a raging liberal Democrat to work for a Republican governor.
He was married to a Kennedy. Come on.
Right. So that didn't matter, obviously.
Yeah.
But it was more so that was okay. It was more how to function in a rigid state government process. So, from production, there's a problem, you solve it. Or you need something, you get it done, you move on. Next. The process to get anything done in state government is excruciatingly slow. And it's quite difficult to have the patience to deal with that, and how to figure out the workaround. Like, it's okay, so, well, how do we get around that? Which you can't always.
So it's even worse than, I think of it as there's production time, then there's corporate time, which is excruciating to production people, and then government time has got to be so hard.
Exactly. It's the worst. It is the worst.
Well, you must have figured it out. You've been there a long time.
I figured it out, or sometimes you just pick what you're going to fight for, because you only have so much time.
So you pick your battles.
Yeah. So, so it worked out. I've been there 12 years now. Yeah. And then, so the way it works is when one governor leaves, usually you're asked to leave. I was not asked to leave. And then eventually I was reappointed by Governor Brown.
Congratulations. So you spent most of your career working for a very powerful woman. Mm-hmm. And then you went into government, which sounds like it was fairly male at the top level. It's interesting to me, because a lot of people I talk to have been, the one woman in the room as they've worked their way up, or have really had to modify how they behave or how they act in order to make it, because they were in such a male-dominated plays, but I assume you had the opposite experience.
Oh, yes. That's really interesting. Right. So because I was working for a woman director who was, sort of holds the ultimate power on a production.
And there are so few of them.
Right. Especially then. Penny Marshall was the first director to have a movie break $100 million at the box office. That was on Big. So that was a big deal.
But they forget that when they think, it's so risky to have a woman direct a movie.
Yeah. And yes, I did think about that a lot because it was very often, she was indeed, she was the only woman in the room. Whether it was, there were studio executives on the creative side who we worked with. There were always female executives. There were, her department heads would be a mixture. But more often than not, it really felt like, she was the only woman in the room and me, and on the shoot, the only woman in the van. And the only woman in the editing room and all of that. But I didn't encounter any of the bad side of that I think a lot of people do coming up because of that. Mm-hmm. Because my boss was a woman, and believe me, I had this sort of invisible protection around me because of who I worked for. Yeah. So I didn't have any issues with men throughout my career because of that, because of who I worked for.
Yeah.
That's
great.
Yeah.
And I think it's unusual.
It is, I know, because I hear the stories and I didn't have that.
Yeah. So now where you are, everybody in town, and you see all kinds of people doing production. I imagine you deal with male producers, female producers, production executives of every stripe. Do you find any difference working with men in your position versus working with women?
I don't actually. No, not from where I sit now, because we're just at the Film Commission. We're offering services to productions. They're coming to us if they need help. I don't really feel a difference at all, to tell you the truth. We deal with both primarily studio executives on the production and finance side, or producers, and it's both. It's both male and female, and there really isn't a difference from what I can see. Not now, so I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like kind of the power in Hollywood is evening out?
It's hard for me to tell from my perspective, because again, right now I'm not dealing with the creative side or the people at the higher decision-making levels. So it's only really what I hear and what I read that I just don't know. It's hard to tell now. Well, it still feels like we haven't come very far in terms of, just female directors. There's still, it was really rare that I was working for one my whole career, and maybe I didn't realize how rare it was back then.
But it's normal.
It's still rare now. So it seems like maybe things haven't changed that much. Just in terms of the volume and how many people are doing it.
The percentage is still really low.
Mm-hmm.
Do you consider yourself a success?
Sure, I do. Yeah.
Good for you.
But yes, absolutely, I do, because I, like I said, I was very lucky. I was very lucky to get that first job, which turned into a career and led me to all my training and moving up and being a producer and moving on from there to a complete career change. So yes, I do. Do
you consider yourself a badass?
No, I wouldn't ever use that to describe myself.
How do you hear that word?
I think that feels more aggressive than I think I am. I'm a problem solver, but I would never describe myself as a badass. That's too cool for me, maybe.
Do you feel like in your career, did you ever feel like you had to modify your communication style in order to accomplish what you needed to accomplish?
I'm sure I learned how to have a better communication style, but I don't know if I consciously modified it. I think it was more probably just, like, again, on the job training and figuring out how to talk to people to get the answer you need. A lot of it's similar. Like, now what I always say is people call us when they need help to try and get a no turned into a yes, right? Somebody might want to shoot somewhere and they were told no, and they come to us and we try to help use our negotiating skills or diplomacy skills to try and help people get access to what they need. And I think that's probably true on a production too, all the time. You got to get the director what they need. Yeah. And there's a way to kind of come around and figure out the best strategy to get you there.
Is it a matter of being able to read people to get them to do what you need?
Well, sure. A lot, because you're dealing with so many different types of personalities, and being able to work with all that's what I used to love about production. It was so many different types of personalities, from the Teamster captain down to the wardrobe supervisor. It was such a different, wide array of personalities, and I thought that was really fun. But yeah, it was interesting. But I guess you do learn how to work with so many different types of people. That I think that's helpful in life.
Yeah. What do you like most about your job?
I found that I do think that this problem solving, this theme about problem solving has really become, I do like that. I like working through things and kind of figuring out how to get people what they need through that, having to really think it through. I do like that. Yeah.
It's like a puzzle.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think you're paid the same as your male counterparts?
Well, in state government, it's different because it's so rigid, and it's not. I don't believe there isn't anything like what I do in state government here, and I honestly don't know about other states. But that would, So I honestly don't know. It's pretty rigid. There's a whole system for how they figure out compensation and all of that. Yeah.
Okay.
And you know what else? There's a lot of women in state government, who I've worked with throughout these, dozen years at very high levels. So I don't think that's an issue here.
Good.
Yeah, it is good.
How have you managed being a mother and being in this business?
Yeah. I think for other people it's harder than I had it, because, like, remember when I started having kids, I guess you could say I was transitioning out of production, right, because of just the timing, the way it worked out. But I have to say that I guess had I not had kids, I might have made some very different career choices. One of the reasons why this career shift, working for the Film Commission, was attractive to me was precisely because I was a mother with 2 young girls. I may not have decided to do it if I didn't have kids, but the normal hours was very attractive to me. So I never looked back. It worked out. As I tell people, this has been a great mom job. So, my kids don't remember that I was in production. They remember that I'm home for dinner every night. And it's really important to me. But I see other people, and it's so hard. And then how do you go on location? And people make career sacrifices, and they don't take certain jobs because they don't want to go on location, or because they have kids at home. So I guess for me, the timing worked out really well to do this career shift. Yeah, but it's so hard. Well, you know.
Yeah, it's hard. It is not easy.
Yeah.
But you do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And then how have you, because your husband, is he still working in production?
So I always say, it's like one parent has to have this steady 9 to 6 gig, and the other parent can be freelance, but it's hard to have 2 parents working in production, because who picks their job? I knew a couple, the couple was a second AD and a prop master, and they would take turns working because they both couldn't be on a production at the same time.
Right.
In my
That's
case,
not always so easy to time.
No, it isn't.
The jobs come when they come.
In our case, so I had the steady gig, and he had the freelance gig, so that was okay. And actually, he's transitioned to writing full time, so he's home all the time. Yeah. So that worked. It was very good timing.
So then, how do you negotiate the home work?
Okay. I think we have a very interesting division of labor, or not. It's just because he's got the more flexible schedule. Because he's a writer, he's the carpool dad and the picking up from school dad and the taking to dance class and taking to soccer practice. So he
throw the school auction.
Right, the fundraising stuff. Right, so he can like say, okay, I'm going to stop working at 3:00 and go deal with that. So it works out really well for me. Yeah.
What advice would you give women starting out in entertainment right now?
I sort of give the same advice whether it's male or female. Although I guess one of the things is most people that are young that are starting out, doesn't matter how many hours they work, but I would encourage them to, if someone's getting into production, do as much as you can now, because I know how challenging it is once you want to have kids.
Yeah.
Everybody who has kids has to make a major decision on what they're going to do. Either they have to find a transition like I did, or make a lot of sacrifices at home. It's a personal choice, but I don't think that's ever going to go away, ever.
Yeah, it's not a great career for raising families.
No. Mm-mm. Unless you transition into maybe a studio job, or a in-house kind of job.
Yeah.
But doing actual production, it's so tough.
It's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it changes.
And you have to have enough money to have a nanny or have childcare. You have to be able to have some childcare, or you can't do it at all.
For sure.
Yeah.
So people should work like crazy in their 20s.
That's right.
And then transition to a studio job.
Yeah. Be prepared to work the 16-hour days. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sock that money away.
Yeah. But then there's that other thing. Like, I waited a long time to have kids because of career. Because I couldn't think of how that was going to fit in. So I had my first kid at 38.
Wow.
Yes.
Advanced maternal age.
Yes. And that's also, I don't know if that's so great. I mean, everything's fine, but that's not, even though you want to have kids younger, I think.
You're tired.
Yeah. But so it's that toss-up. It's sort of like, do you take a little break in the middle and then kind of get back into it when the kids are older? It's really challenging, because either way, it's not ideal, I guess.
Yeah.
Waiting so long to have kids, I think, is not ideal, but taking a break in the middle is really hard, because then how do you get back in?
It's hard to get back in.
I hear that a lot from people about who take time off and then try and jump back into the workforce, and it's really hard.
Do men have this problem?
No, I don't think they do, right? Because they're not going to take that kind of time off.
Right.
Maybe they do, and I just don't know them, but I don't see that as being that big of an issue.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Although I suspect if they do take the time off, it may be even harder for them to get back in. Because it's unexpected.
Yeah.
What do you feel is the next step for women?
Well, I guess ultimately the next step is where there's no gender. There is no where it's basically gender blind. I guess that's the next step, right? I mean,
the post unbiased gender discrimination era.
Yeah,
we're not quite there.
Right.
We can see what it looks like. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you very much.
You've been listening to The Other 50%. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Amy Lemisch for sharing her story. And special thanks to Jonathan Lucas for editing, Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review, and on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out, for added features and bios of our guests. Thanks for listening. See you next time.